Hello, everybody. Welcome to Surviving the School Year in partnership with Old Mutual. It is really great to be with you all here today. And I'm Kevin Allen. I am the Chief Community Officer at Open EXO. It is really great. And apologies there for the double sound. So I just want to give you a few tips about this platform where we are hosting this event today. So as you can see down the one side of the screen, you can see the stage, the sessions, as well as networking. And then we have a chat on the right side. Please be on the stage chat if you want to make any comments there. And to let us continue, I'm going to invite up onto the stage Salim Ismail as well as Lily Safrani, just to do a quick welcome.
Hi, Kent. Kevin, how are you? Thank you for organizing this, and many thanks to Old Mutual for sponsoring this. I want to turn it over to Lily to give a little brief introduction. Lily's the founder of Surviving the School Year. Started with a camp that we ran on our driveway last summer for all the kids in the neighborhood, and basically it changed their lives because everybody was so stuck. Lily, why don't you talk about how that came about and why we're doing this?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We were inspired to create Surviving the School Year because I think as parents struggling to make our lives work during this pandemic year, which has really felt like a roller coaster so much of the time, we thought if we could bring together some thinkers and people to discuss what their experiences have been so they can share, then maybe we can help each other navigate, make it a little bit smoother. One strategy that supported our year last year was to run a summer camp on our driveway. It was creative and innovative for last year. I don't even know, now that we're heading into next summer here in the Northeast, if we would be able to do that same, to create that same initiative. So I think the more we can come together and brainstorm and continue to support one another, maybe we can make our lives all just a little bit easier.
So when we ran the summer camp, Lily ran it. I was just helping watch from the side and praying that nobody would, we wouldn't have an outbreak and nobody got injured on the driveway.
We would lose our hot water for 3 weeks.
Exactly. We actually had parents throwing their kids out the car window going, please take the kid. And so Lily brainstormed and came up with this idea to take it online. We, by good fortune, have access to the leading thinkers in the world on parenting and managing all of that. The key thing was all of the strategies that we have as parents, babysitting and play dates and carpooling,
date nights.
It's all out the window.
A few minutes, private minutes to ourselves in the day.
That's right. It's all been out the window. So how do you cope with this? So we've brought together some leading experts around that, and that's what we'll do. Anything else that you wanted to say around this?
Well, again, I consider an event like this an opportunity to brainstorm, and maybe you'll pick up some nuggets or ideas that could support you in your day-to-day lives that you wouldn't have picked up otherwise. So I think listen for those nuggets, listen for the pieces that might be useful to you, and we wish you a great year or a smooth year as you're heading into this new school year.
Wonderful. Kevin, you want to say a couple of words?
Perfect. So Lily, thanks so much for the intro. Really good to see you again. We are going to be, as Salim said, speaking and hearing from some amazing experts from around the world, and then we also have a time to have discussions. So there is an open session where we have divided it into different age groups for parents, and that's a perfect time for, as Lily has said, to discuss, to come up with ideas, to share what you've been doing to really make it a success. So Lily, thanks so much for being with us. And
Thanks,
we are
Kevin.
now, sorry, Lily. We are now going to head over to our startup speaker, which is Salim Ismail himself, who is going to be speaking about the exponential world that we live in as a context for this discussion today.
Great. So I'm going to share my screen.
Bye, Salim. Bye, Kevin.
I'm going to share my screen and let's see if this works. And I want to talk you through a sense of what's happening in the world. You know, the pandemic is like a singularity. We study these models and we think about what will the world look like. And so I want to give you some sense of that. Let me kind of go to this. And can you see my screen? Window, ting, share. And Kevin, give me some sense if you can do this. No,
absolutely, Salim.
You can see it?
At the moment, it is just a white screen.
All right, I've got to change my security settings on my browser naturally because this is not going to work there. Are you able to share a screen? Well, I'll just talk through what's happening because I think this really doesn't require a presentation per se. Let me give a little bit about my background, and then I'm going to talk through what we're seeing out in the world and why this is so important. I'm originally from India. Grew up in Canada. Spent 10 years in Europe, and then I've spent the last 20 years in the US. My journey really starts at Yahoo 15 years ago. I was the head of innovation, and I recognized a fundamental problem, which is when you try anything disruptive in a legacy environment, the immune system attacks you. Because all of our organizations, all of our institutions are designed to withstand risk and resist change, which goes to our parenting techniques, which goes to our education models. Talk to any banker about Bitcoin, and you'll see that immune system response. They get hives and they literally can't cope. So I was fascinated by this problem, and what's happening in the world today really begs a different view of how to think about the world. I went from that to helping build out an organization called Singularity University. We had a huge summit in South Africa recently, and we created an organization that focuses on accelerating technologies. And it really focuses on a particular chart of Moore's Law. Many of you are familiar with the idea that we double the price performance of computation every 18 months. That's been happening for 60 years. And a leading thinker called Ray Kurzweil noticed that this has been actually happening for 110 years. Through wars and recessions, through ups and downs in the industry, it turns out that the very steady 18-month doubling pattern doesn't stop. And his key question that he answered and asked about why was this happening was really what is driving that steady change, right? We should have a very jagged stock market shape. Instead, you see this incredible steady doubling pattern, and it doesn't make sense. It should level off. It can't just keep going on a very steady pattern through wars and recessions, etc. He spent 10 years researching this and came up with a very fundamental observation, which is that once you take a domain or discipline or industry area or product area and you power it with information technologies and it acquires informational flow properties, the price performance starts doubling. And most importantly, once that doubling starts, it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. So if you have any experience in computation, you may remember that we've gone through vacuum tubes and relays and transistors and now integrated circuits. You can think of each one as like an S-curve where a technology takes off, accelerates because of the adoption, reaches its upper limits, right? And so then you think, okay, it's got to level off now. But if you have an information-based paradigm, something else always takes over the curve. And that's why it just keeps going. And the really big thing that's happening today is we've seen computation go for 60 years, but we now have a dozen technologies that are layered on top of computation that are all doubling now because of this underlying computational price performance. The price performance of drones is doubling every 9 months. The solar energy is doubling every 2 years. The range of an autonomous car is doubling every 2 years or so. The resolution at which we can image the human brain is doubling about every year. The speed at which we can sequence the human genome is doubling every 6 months. And this is a very big difference from linear change. All of our education, intuition, training about the world teaches us linear extrapolation, right? If I take 30 steps, I'll go 30 meters, I'll get to the bottom of my garden. We can all very well gauge where I might be a third of the way or 2/3 of the way in that progression. We're very good at that linear extrapolation. But if I take 30 doubling steps, 2, 4, 8, 16, etc., and I do 30 doubling steps like that, at step 30, I've gone 1 billion meters. I'm actually 26 times around the world, which is a bit further than the bottom of the garden. And it's very hard to gauge where I might be a third of the way or 2/3 of the way down that progression. Now we have entire industries and entire domains going up that stack. The world used to look very physical, but now we're increasingly adding digital models. Music is a good example, where we used to sell the CDs or DVDs or cassettes. Then we information enabled it. We could stream music, and all the old music studios disappeared. And essentially now you pay $10 a month for unlimited music, right? So we've gone from a scarcity model to an abundance model. And a fundamental characteristic of technology is it takes something from scarcity to abundance, like we've seen in music or news or social media and others. Now that we have a dozen technologies all on this doubling pattern, there's unbelievable explosion. And I frame this as 20 Gutenberg moments. In the 15th century, the printing press fundamentally changed the world. And we call that now a Gutenberg moment because of the transformational effect it had on society. Well, solar energy fundamentally changes the world. Blockchain fundamentally changes the world. AI is fundamentally changing the world. You have CRISPR, you have biotech breakthroughs. These mRNA vaccines that we're all taking right now, our head of biotech calls this the first battle in the last war against disease. We think we'll be able to nail cancer in the next few years. So there's unbelievable technological progression happening, and I call these 20 Gutenberg moments. The big challenge is that this is very hard for us to absorb. And what you see when you see a new technology is people freak out and become very French, and they go, no, pas possible, and we must ban it. I'll use the Google car as an example. The first reaction, the visceral amygdala reaction to an autonomous car is, oh my word, that car might kill somebody, better ban the car, right? Because people don't like to be killed by robots. They'd much rather be killed by drunk drivers, which is what's happening today. And every Tesla that crashes is in the news massively, but we ignore the other 40,000 people a year that die in the US, or 1.2 million people a year that die in car accidents around the world every year. In the US, 50% of all legal court cases are car accident related. So if you automate driving, you might actually get rid of a lot of the lawyers, which would be a really wonderful thing, certainly in the US. So there's this incredible positive effects that people don't see, because we have a little amygdala in our brains that's constantly scanning for bad news, which we evolved on the plains of Africa when we were first evolving. If you heard a noise in the bushes, you ran because bad news could kill you. Good news doesn't kill you, so you're actually 10 times more likely to pay attention to bad news than good news, which is why Fox News does very well. If you watch Fox News, you're going to die this week. If you're lucky, you'll last till next week, but you're going to die. Every news story, they say in the news world, if it bleeds, it leads, right? This is why, because it's triggering your amygdala. Because then we think the world is going to hell. You vote on that, and then you end up with Brexit or Trump. And the politics of fear almost always wins out against the politics of hope. In actual reality, the world is infinitely better than we've ever seen. Extreme poverty 200 years ago was 94% of humanity. Okay, 94% of humanity lived in extreme poverty on 2011 parity dollars, the equivalent of. Today, it's less than 9%. Okay? And you don't see that in the news because it's good news, it doesn't sell. We've actually seen predictions that we will eradicate extreme poverty by the end of this decade. Let me just touch on one example, which is solar energy, which has been dropping in its price performance for 40 years, doubling roughly every 2 years. At the pace that we're on, we will be able to deliver free energy to the world, enough to power the entire world in 10 years, okay? Which will have a massive geopolitical impact. The Middle East collapses, the US has to find other reasons to go to war. The poorest countries in the world are the sunniest countries in the world, right? So that becomes really interesting from a balancing out of world need. Now, if you don't need energy, where do you put your efforts? You have free energy, lots of other things become possible. And I'm hugely optimistic about Africa because, take the landline phenomena. If I remember the statistics correctly, Africa had about 25 million landlines across the entire continent. And then we had cell phones, and now there's about 2 billion handsets across Africa, right? And so you leapfrog the entire wireline generation and went straight to wireless. In the same way that there's about $1 trillion of infrastructure needed to lay roads down across Africa. Well, we have drones coming, which can leapfrog that technology. And so I believe that Africa is the most high potential region in the world exactly for that reason. In the US or Europe or Japan, they have to undo 60 years of 20th century thinking and redo new models, whereas in Africa or Latin America or parts of Asia, you can just leapfrog to the new model. Now, the key driver of all of this, and the second thing that's very unique, first is we have a dozen technologies all doubling in this way. But the second thing is that in the entire history of humanity, it's always been true that advanced technologies cost a lot. So only a big private corporate lab or a government lab could afford to do R&D, launch new products and services. Today, for the first time in human history, advanced technologies are very cheap. Solar energy is cheap. The blockchain is open source and free. The tools we use to create AI are open source and free also. I'll use the example of Ethereum, if you're familiar with in the crypto world. Vitalik Buterin was an 18-year-old student, ignored his professors, and has created what now is almost a $300 billion industry out of nothing in 6 years. That's the potential. Your favorite son, Elon Musk, is a great example of this. Today, any entrepreneur has the opportunity to enter a legacy environment, leverage new capabilities, and disrupt it completely. And Elon is a great example of that, maybe the best example in the world. And by the way, his methodology is very simple. What he will do is take a look at a technology like solar energy or batteries or space rocket fuel, see that it's growing exponentially, aim 10 years out. Where will that technology be in a 10-year doubling pattern? And then let's build a company to intercept that curve in a 10-year period. And whether it's neural links or solar energy, etc., that model is proving very successful. That means any entrepreneur can enter a legacy industry and disrupt it because the cost of entry is near zero. And you think that may be only true for Silicon Valley and so on, but that's not. That can happen anywhere in the world. My favorite example of that is a fishing village in Vietnam, where once a month a big ship with diesel fuel would come carrying diesel for their fishing boats. At some point, the ship stopped coming. They had no fuel for their boats. They literally bought a solar panel, looked up the internet, how to connect it to the propeller, and invented a solar-powered boat. So here you have cutting-edge innovation using disruptive technologies happening at the edge of civilization. We get very excited when we see that. When they get their hands on drones and CRISPR and blockchain, things are going to get very interesting indeed. And so now we have, my other favorite example is the highest performing electric supercar in the world is called the Vega, V-E-G-A, and it's being built and created in Sri Lanka. That hotbed of automotive innovation. So it really shows today that anybody can do breakthrough innovation anywhere. All you require is the mindset. And I think Elon is demonstrating that very, very powerfully. And just to give you an example of this, I was chatting with him. I'm on the board of XPRIZE, where we just announced a $100 million carbon extraction XPRIZE that Elon is funding. And I was chatting with him about the Hyperloop. He wants to go from LA to San Francisco in 20 minutes at about 4,000 miles an hour. And I said, Elon, my degree's in theoretical physics. If you accelerate a human being from 0 to 4,000 miles an hour and then decelerate them back to 0, you're probably going to kill them. And his response was, yeah, it's an issue, right? So in this case, I'm the expert. I'm thinking, well, that's not possible. And he's like, yeah, we have to overcome that hurdle. And that mindset is now being used by tens of thousands of entrepreneurs around the world to radically change the world. So we have the most exciting explosion of innovation coming that we will ever see in the history of humanity. The way Ray Kurzweil puts it is that we will see more innovation in the next 20 years than we saw in the previous 20,000 years. So just try and get your head around that. The enormous challenges that all of our educational institutions and journalism, our monetary systems, our legal systems, our healthcare systems were all designed for a few hundred years ago. right? Not for today. Our parenting techniques are designed from a long time ago, not for today. And how do we teach our kids? How do we guide them in the future? You know, if you went back 1,000 years, the lives that our grandparents led was exactly the same lives as our parents led, was exactly the lives that we led, and the same lives that we taught to our kids. So you could pass wisdom down generation to generation, and one generation could teach the next, watch out for this, if you hear that noise, run, or don't eat those berries in this season, etc. And there was deep learning transmitted because the world didn't change generation to generation. Think about us as parents, how different our lives are from just our parents, right? And our kids are even more different. That gap is actually growing. So the models that we learned from our parents about parenting can't be applied. I mean, they were out of date by the time they were trying to parent us. They can't be applied to the parenting that we need with our kids today. This is a whole other, I think of a child under 12 years old as even a different species, like they're not even human, right? They are digitally native, and they operate with complete freedom and comfort with digital devices, and we're still trying to hack away. If you talk to a 22-year-old with an iPhone, they can type on the iPhone without looking at the phone, which is nuts to anybody of my generation. So this is an incredibly different world, and the way we parent has to be done differently. What's happened is the pandemic has essentially ground our entire old model to a halt. And now that global supertanker has ground to a halt, let's take that opportunity, wrench the wheel, restructure, and build back better with better institutions, better models for education, better models for governance and legal systems and healthcare systems. And that's the work that our community is doing. We have a community of about 8,000 consultants that use the ideas in the book that I wrote called Exponential Organizations, hence EXO. And you can join the community at openexo.com. And we're agents for transformation. We create tools to solve this immune system problem. We started with the private sector, where we went into Procter & Gamble, and we ran a 10-week program that allows you to hack culture at scale and move the leadership, culture, and management thinking 3 years ahead in 10 weeks. We've now since run that 50 times with big companies around the world, Black & Decker, HP in South Africa with Vodacom, to change culture in a big company and hack it so that we can embrace disruptive innovation rather than rejecting it. We also have a nonprofit called the Fast Track Institute that does the same work in the public sector. So we've adapted the process. It takes 16 weeks because it's public sector, but it works. And we've run it several times in Medellin in Colombia. We worked with the mayor in Miami to transform public transportation in Miami. We believe we're slightly causal to why Miami is one of the hotbeds in the world today. We just worked with the Supreme Court in Colombia to transform the justice system in Colombia. So our world, our ecosystem, is for-profit and nonprofit process frameworks to transform the ecosystem. And this type of event where we talk about how do we do proper parenting in a disruptive world is kind of fundamental to our ethos, because if we can't parent our kids properly, then and guide them properly, they'll end up with lots of downstream issues. The stress of loneliness, the suicide rates have exploded, etc. So what we've done is gathered for you today some of the top thinkers in the world and experts in the world in parenting and personal relationships and managing a family and so on. And we'll hear from a couple of them very shortly. I wanted to give you some deep sense of optimism, though, about what's happening, because it's really easy to go into like a doomsday scenario and go, oh my God, the world is a mess, because our amygdala so loves bad news. But we have incredibly magical things happening. I mentioned poverty. Solar energy will deliver us free energy in the next 10 years anywhere in the world. It's specific to South Africa. I want to highlight a project that we created at XPRIZE called the Water Abundance Prize. This was a prize to create a machine that will extract clean water out of the atmosphere. And so the challenge was, it was a multi-million-dollar prize if you can create a machine that can extract 2,000 liters of water a day out of the atmosphere, which is enough for an apartment building or a small village, using only renewable energy at a cost of less than 2 cents a liter. Okay, so can you create a machine that will, kind of like a reverse air conditioner, condense water out of the atmosphere, 2,000 liters a day, so decent volume at less than 2 cents a liter? Typically, we design prizes for about a 7-8 year run, so teams have time to form, take multiple cracks at the problem, etc. 18 months into it, a team popped up and said, we've done it. We actually tested their solution and awarded the prize. We now have the prototype of a machine that can deliver clean water anywhere in the world that way. So we essentially solve the clean water problem, which I know is a huge issue in Cape Town. 300 cities in India are about to run out of water. So as a sense of optimism, what if we created an export factory in South Africa or other parts of Africa, making that machine? There's 1 million villages around the world on mountains in Indonesia and in the Andes and all over Africa that could use a solution like that. Every apartment building in the world is a candidate as our old infrastructure starts to fail over. And so that's the kind of thing we're seeing. Hundreds of those types of solutions pop up. Many of them coming from places like Africa and South Africa, of really radical things. I want to show you one other one. I'll give you a live demo here. This is a device for detecting breast cancer. Okay, and if you see those little dots on this pad, those are very sensitive nano temperature sensors. So for a woman, you put this on left and right side of your chest for about 10 minutes. You take a picture of the barcode. What it does a very sensitive temperature sensing across that part of the body, and you upload the image, and then AI analyzes the delta of the temperature between left and right side. And if you do it every 6 months, the delta from when you did it 6 months ago. This approach of temperature sensing to detect breast cancer results in an 80% better breast cancer detection than a mammogram. Costs about $20 or $30, and it's FDA approved in the US. It's fully tested and proven. So we can essentially eradicate breast cancer by just giving this to every woman in the world, right? And so that's part of the reason we get so excited, because we have new breakthroughs coming that will literally transform our healthcare world, our education world, all of our systems and all of our infrastructure. But we have to solve that immune system problem and how we think about things. And the reason for an event like this is there's no more valuable resource than our children. And if we can parent them 5% better, that sends them on a better vector into the future. As Lily mentioned earlier, all of the strategies as we have in the parents, of play dates and carpools and date nights and finding the right toys and keeping them off screens, etc. Essentially, it disappears during this pandemic period, and it's clear that this is not ending. We have India being ravaged. The 99-year-old matriarch of my family in India passed away from COVID 2 weeks ago, and it's ravaging the country. The same thing is happening in Brazil. I know South Africa has some major issues. And so this is not going away anytime soon. We're going to have to deal with this. And you have, of course, all of the chaotic effects. You may have come across this crazy school in Miami where they basically said, if you're a teacher, we don't believe in the vaccine and we don't want you to teach if you're vaccinated. Just think about the issues of that one. And so there's all sorts of chaotic information. And us as parents are the most important constituency in the world today, because we have to somehow hold the container and hold ourselves together and give a place for our kids to grow up in as safe and as encouraging and as enlightened an environment as possible. So what I want to do now is Kevin, will you introduce Shefali, or should I do that?
No, absolutely, Salim. So thank you so much for giving us that context around the world that we're living in. And so next up, we do have Dr. Shefali Tsabary. And Salim, perhaps you can speak about the conversation that you and Lily had with her as an intro, and we'll then bring Shefali up onto the stage.
Sure. So Shefali Tsabary is from India. Actually grew up in the hometown that I'm from in near Mumbai, and is the world's expert on navigating family connection and relationships and parenting, and how do you navigate that in today's world? How do you bring spirit to your parenting techniques and not be caught off guard by demands and insistence of your child, etc. She's Oprah Winfrey's favorite parenting guru and has written a series of books. We'll talk about the book that she just came out with called Super something. I don't remember the title offhand, but it's her insights on how to think about being a parent today and how to navigate powerful, loving families is incredibly important. So let's turn it over to Shefali. Yes.
Yes, I can. Every time you say world expert, like I have a reaction. So
well, people call us that, so you're welcome to the program. But talk us through how you think about conscious families and conscious parenting, because everybody online is struggling with the same problem, and we have nobody better to describe how to think about this and how to navigate this than you. Over to you, Shefali Tsabary.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And parenting is enigmatic. Parenting is unique for every parent and child, and parenting is monumental. Ask any parent and they will tell you that nothing has transplanted them, supplanted them, and ruined their state of inner peace than being a parent. Why? Because suddenly your well-being, your identity, your sense of self now is no longer within your control. Now we realize as a parent, oh, it kind of belongs to somebody else. And this giving of our identity to our children is where the most beautiful aspects of parenting come forth, but also the tragedies and the dysfunction. So let me explain. I teach something called conscious parenting. What does that mean? That means how can we become conscious of how we use our children to fulfill our expectations? How do we channel our own unmet needs and our own unmet desires through our children and pretend and assume that it's their responsibility to fulfill these desires within us? Most of us were raised in an unconscious style of parenting, a traditional model of parenting where our parents subsumed that we would simply be their automatons, be their projections, be their puppets. They had desires of us. They put their traditions onto us. They told us who to believe in, how to believe in, what to believe in. And we were supposed to simply follow like sheep in the herd. Except, of course, then you get mavericks like Salim and Lily and myself and you, and we revolted against that. It did not work for us. We were suffocated by that. But we had to fight a mighty battle to break away. Many, many millions of children are fighting this battle silently. Some children fight it rebelliously. Some children succumb and withdraw and get depressed and get addicted to a substance to kind of cope with the pain of having to meet a standard that their parents set for them, but it doesn't fit with their authentic self. So this clash is how most of us grow up. In conscious parenting, I try to help parents align with their children's authentic self and see their children for who it is they are without projecting all this unmet need, unmet expectation, childhood wounds from the parent onto the child. Now, how do we see another person for who it is they are? How do we truly connect to another's essence with a fine-tuned alignment? How do we do this when we've never done it for ourselves? So conscious parenting really teaches parents to first raise themselves into a state of wholeness alongside the raising of their children. And when we see that we ourselves are filled with holes and gaps and unmet needs and wounds, we will less project these onto our children, and we're more likely to then see our children for who it is they are. We begin to understand that we were not seen for who it is we were, that we were simply automatons in our parents' theatrics, puppeteered to meet their expectations. We begin to see, wow, I was really living inauthentic. I was really living as a vehicle to fulfill my parents' destiny. I was really trying to get my parents to approve of me. And all this time, I have this inner void now. Now, if we are not aware of these things, what happens is we simply project this onto our children. And now we make our children automatons. And the generational suffering continues on and on. So conscious parenting dares to break the pattern, to disrupt the pattern. How? By telling the parent, hey, you're filled with all this emotional baggage, with all this stuff that you don't even know you have, and you're going to put it all onto your children unless you wake up, or at least begin to wake up. There is no final destination called I have woken up, but at least you'll begin to wake up. And what happens when you begin to wake up is you begin to become aware. Oh, when I tell my child that it's really good for them to ski backwards, it may be because it's my own desire to be special and to post that picture on Facebook. Or when I tell my child, learning 3 languages is going to elasticize your brain and it's good for your social emotional development, maybe that kind of overachievement is from my own hunger of my own unworthiness. Maybe. So you begin to become aware that all the things you dictate to your children may be coming from your own unmet need. Okay, so that's the overview of the basics of conscious parenting. Now what do? We're in this shit show called the pandemic. We're like, oh my goodness, all my plans for my children to have extracurricular activities, and my kid was on travel baseball, and I was going to go to the gala where I was going to get the award of the best martyred parent of the year. All those plans have gone to the gutter. This is the best teaching in terms of conscious parenting, because it shows parents like you were crazy. You were in some dog, horse, pony show of your own making. You were in your own circus, and you were stressed out. You were on this achievement roller coaster. You were sending your kids on this conveyor belt, and it was maddening. How do I know what I'm saying is true? Because I saw children pre-pandemic in my practice, and children were stressed out, chaotic, overscheduled, no time to breathe. And 3 years ago, publishers approached me and my colleague, begging us to write a book on anxiety 3 years ago, because 1 in every 5 children in the US were being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So we wrote this book. It just came out. We did not time it for the pandemic. Buy the book. Okay, that's my plug. That's all. So we wrote this book, which is the most appropriate book now for the pandemic, because now we have anxiety that is on steroids. Now, why do we have anxiety right now in the pandemic as parents and passing it on to our children? You know why we do? Because we cannot adapt. We were so obsessively, compulsively addicted to the doing of life. Doing. We were so identified with achievement and worth and status and going through the checklist. My daughter is 17 3/4. You know what that means? That means she was about to go to college. I was looking at freedom right across the horizon. I could touch freedom. Now I'm like, oh my God, what if she never goes to college? I can't adapt. So what I'm making fun of myself, because I was so on this linear path, I was just going down the milestones, and I was so excited that we were at the end of the journey. And this just shows us that life wasn't meant to be lived like that. We had lost ourselves in the melee, in the cauldron of chaos. And this is telling us to stop. Now, I'm taking the spiritual meaning out of this, and I'm not denying or minimizing the deaths. I have lost people close to me in my family to COVID. So I'm not minimizing the grief and the sorrow. I'm talking about big picture. How do we see this as a growth opportunity? How do we see this as a portal, a tunnel, channel of transformation? And in order to do that, you have to activate meaning. In order to survive and thrive, we have to glean meaning out of current tragedy. And this is what I'm proposing to you, that if we see this as a unique, singular opportunity to slow the F down, to become simplified, to take things off our plate, to understand that the way we were living was not okay, was not normal, that there needed to be a reorganization anyway. We were hurtling down a steep slope of madness and anxiety and taking our children with us. So, how can we reorganize the meaning of this pandemic for ourselves and for our children? The greater we can do that as parents, the more our children will see this as a moment in time that they'll actually remember for the rest of their life in a positive way. It depends on us as parents because our children absorb our ways of being. So if we parents understand that this is a time to adapt, this is a time to simplify, this is a time to return to inner solitude and inner connectivity, and that this is actually, quote unquote, a healing opportunity. Now you get to see your children on Zoom. Now you get to empathize with them that it's really hard to pay attention. Now you begin to see that teachers are underpaid and underserved and under recognized. Now we begin to see that mental health is really important. Now we begin to see that it doesn't matter that we don't have travel baseball or 16 activities on our schedule. We're coming back down to basics. And this is a good thing because we parents had become an industrialized complex. I called parenting an industrial complex where everyone was eating the meat of our children for profit. From the universities to the colleges to the high schools to extracurriculars to the hobby centers, everything had become profit-based at the expense of our children. And now parents are forced to, connect, forced to do arts and crafts because, deliveries are taking too long. Forced to read books with their children, forced to engage with them 24/7. While it is definitely a challenge, I face it too, I live with a teenager, it is also an opportunity to reorganize our lives and to understand that we can't go back to the way things were because the way things were dreadful for our children. And now we get an opportunity to reimagine college, for example. Now colleges have become test optional. And I laugh because till this moment in time, the SATs and the ACTs were the holy grail. Just to show you that those things were false identifications. And what the real wisdom teaching here is to ask ourselves, how have I been living my life as a parent, as a non-parent? How have I been basing my worth? Have I been basing it on my Prada shoes, on my Gucci bag, on my Bentley, on my fabulous, fantastic partner, on how I look? Because all that has gone away now. And we're forced to ask, who am I? So this is a unique and profound opportunity for us as human beings to reimagine civilization, to reimagine society, and to certainly reimagine your parenting. And when the things click and the emotional pennies drop, maybe we parents will realize that it's time to simply allow our children to return to their essence, to return to their authentic selves. When I walk into a Zoom meeting that my daughter's having and I see her dazed and confused, I want to control her because I've lived the last 17 years as a parent in the traditional paradigm, perhaps, of control. This pandemic has shown us there is no control. There is no future. All those were illusions. So it's difficult for us parents to adapt, but these are the wisdom teachings. There was never any control. It was always an illusion. The fact that my kid may not go to college and I'm having a hard time is not the pandemic's fault. It's because I had falsely held, the future as my reality. That was my falsity. That was my weakness. There is no future. There is no control. And we need to get this deep existential lesson. When we get this deep existential lesson, we will enter the present moment. We will be grateful for what is here. We will surrender to the isness of the now and really finally learn what I've been trying to teach parents all along, is that our children are who they are. We're not their puppeteers. We're not their craftsmen. We're not their carpenters. We're not here to mold and sculpt them into a creation of our imagination. Now we have to deal with who it is they are, without the accolades, without the merit scholarships, without the trinkets, and we have to deal with ourselves as who it is we are, without the Botox shots and without the butt implants. We're here, in our sweatpants, day in, day out, And now we're truly asked to reconcile our connection with ourselves and then with our children.
Shefali, thank you for that.
Thank you.
We as parents have a million questions. My first is, you have a 17-year-old daughter, but we can leave that separately. How do you deal with the stress? You know, when we're all in a stressed situation, and when you bend a piece of wood, the cracks appear, right? So we all have our inbuilt psychoses. I'm growing up in an Indian family. I want to pull out the backhand now and then. And how do you not go there? And do you have to just be very, very present as a parent? Is that the best advice? Or is there some specific techniques that act as interrupts so that I don't react the wrong way?
Well, you know, so everyone who comes to become a better parent, just like somebody who wants to lose weight, they want the gimmick, right? They want the technique, and they want the 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm really, really sorry to say there is no quick strategy. It is a lifelong commitment to one's spiritual growth. So in terms of a strategy, go to self-help groups, take self-help courses, develop yourself as a human being, figure out your childhood wounds and your baggage, because guaranteed they are going to show up in your parenting. Your reactivity, your lack of patience, your stress level is not because of the pandemic or about the child Tommy or the child Susie or the child Charlie. It's not. It's coming from inside you. And when you realize that all the external is a mirror of the internal, then you will seek to reorganize your internal. And that happens through self-growth. And that is a path. It's a quest. It's not something that somebody can give you. It's your own internal unfolding.
Okay, so no backhands. All right, just check on that one. You must have a couple of questions. And folks, if you've got a question for Shefali,
put it in the thread.
Put it in the text thread, and we'll ask. We've got you for a few more minutes.
We hope we're more awake than we were a few years ago.
Well, I think back to growing up, right?
Yeah.
Our parents had no tools, and you're right, they were unconscious parents by definition. If you went back 1,000 years, the lives one generation led was exactly the same as the next. And one generation could actually teach the next materially how to think about the world. If I think about our parents and how different our world is from them, our kids, the world is even that much more different. It really goes back to, Khalil Gibran's comment about, if you're parents, you're the bow from which your children as arrows sling forth, right? The best you can do is aim and let go, and then just hope for the best and guide as much as possible, which I think is the message.
But we don't do that. But we don't sling them forward. We keep them in our quiver and we suffocate them, and we don't let them go because we want to know where they're going to land. If we were truly the bows, setting them free, we wouldn't have the problems we have.
Well, I think we've done a lot of work over the years also, and have seen where we've been able to calm down and how that trickles down to Milan. So I'm very grateful for those opportunities. I have a nuts and bolts question for you. We have some of this framing of high level, right? But what do we do when our child is running around the house saying, I'm bored?
Okay, so I talk about boredom in my books.
Yeah.
So when our children are bored or unhappy or didn't get invited to a party, or they don't like the big nose that they say they got from your mother, it creates anxiety within us. It attacks our own sense of worth. So when the kid says, I'm bored, we translate it to, what? You're not happy? That means I'm not a good parent? How can you be bored? Look at your toy room. Look at your playroom. Haven't I provided enough? Am I not good enough? And we go down this mad cyclone of neuroses. What that really means when they say I'm bored, or I'm unhappy, or I don't like my nose, or I'm not so smart, is that they're just having feelings. And it is our capacity to tolerate those feelings that will allow them to traverse them like waves on an ocean and pass. But because we are so identified, I said that is the biggest blessing and the biggest curse. Our identification as parents. We love, but we love messed up. We love entwined, we love enmeshed, we love in control. That it's not really love at the end of the day. It's like, do you love me? Am I good enough? Say I'm a good parent. Every day I want my daughter to thank me and lick my feet, honestly. And every day she doesn't, I'm waiting for the next day. I'm like, okay, I'll just be a better parent the next day. I'll just load her with more things and show her how amazing I am. That's really what we're all trying to do, is like, where's the Publisher's Weekly Prize for the best parent of the year? You're waiting for that.
You just nailed me on so many levels. Okay, we have a question from Zaina saying, might Shefali have a perspective on the benefits of siblings in close age going through this confinement together versus kids far apart or single kids? She's finding her kids have been drawn to do things together that they didn't have otherwise.
Great. Why mess up a good thing? Good. I have other parents whose siblings are tearing their hair out, and they're like, why do we have kids close together? Another family? Great. Basically, what I mean by this answer is it is what it is. Now you're getting to see the isness of your isness. And you can either revolt against it, resist it, then you're going to be just all the more unhappy, or you flow with it, surrender to it, and see the beauty in it.
Wonderful. We have got a bunch of thank yous for the various questions. Mark Prensky is asking, isn't something we can do early with our kids, all of this conscious parenting? It sounds like the earlier you start with it, the better, but you can inject at any time.
And it apply when they're an older child.
Yeah, there's a utopic fantasy. I had it myself that if I just meditated for 30 hours a week and I did psychology, all the things I did do, I would manage to not F up my child. It's not true, sadly, because certain crazies only come out of your head, like you begin to see how crazy you are only when you have the kid. So part of this desire to raise a perfect kid is a utopia. Every kid is going to be messed up in some way. They're going to blame you for something or the other. You will be dragged to the therapist and made to apologize at some point in your life and pay for the therapy. So instead of looking to not do certain things, just aspire to be the most whole you can be. Because the more whole you are, then you're going to be in alignment with yourself and not need your children to fill you up. And that's the biggest blessing you can give your kid.
Yeah, wonderful. Kent, who's in the back putting all this together, is at home with 3 kids being homeschooled, etc. And so he's chuckling away, going, oh my God, I'm living all this life. Lily, one final question from you to Dr. Shefali, and then we'll move on.
Any guidance for parents that may be living some of the struggle of their kids learning from home and trying to navigate how to support their kids through the remote schooling, the lack of connection with other friends? Any thoughts?
Well, huge thoughts. I think we need to have great sensitivity to our children, that they are experiencing their own adaptation stress and crisis. This is not a normal environment for them to grow up in terms of not being able to be with peers, not being outside, not feeling free, feeling the anxiety of their parents, seeing death around them more exaggeratedly. So they are going to be nervous. So we as parents need to attune to that, to have empathy for that, and to lower our expectations. Don't expect your kid to be a stellar performer and then practice his piano and then be disciplined and then have a shower and clean his ears. Don't put too much. Just back off. Everybody's under inordinate stress, and have compassion for yourself as well. Don't be baking 10,000 breads because everyone was baking bread, at one point. It's okay. Let it go. We are under duress, and have compassion. And your kid will show the duress in disguised ways, banging doors, eating too much, looking lazy. So just know it could be anxiety underneath all of that.
I think that's a really critical part. All right, wonderful. We could talk to you for hours, obviously. Dr. Shefali Tsabary, can you share your book again? Can you share your book again so everybody can see it?
Well timed on anxiety.
Transform courage into courage, confidence, and resilience. We want our advanced copy as fast as we can. So again, Shefali, thank you for being with us.
So much.
Thank you. Bye.
So there we had the recording from Dr. Shefali. Salim, any thoughts? I see Lily's back that you may have on that.
The pure wisdom that she drops is pretty unbelievable. And as a parent, whenever she speaks, I'm like, oh my God, those are the 15 things I'm doing wrong. And so it really is awe-inspiring to watch how she frames it. And you literally feel yourself being transformed as a parent listening to her.
And I think, on a day-to-day level, when we feel things bubbling over at home and we're feeling stressed in all of the different relationships inside our homes, to whatever extent we can remember to take a breath and allow ourselves some grace, is really helpful. Like, grace is so important right now.
Hugely.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So that's amazing. Salim, if you're ready to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Brenda Wade, who is going to be live with us.
Absolutely. And I'm Lily, you may want to say a couple of things. Dr. Brenda Wade is a clinical psychologist. She's authored 4 books. She's a frequent guest on Oprah, The Today Show, other talk shows, news programs. She's a psychologist, entrepreneur, and she's developed a science-based approach to elevating relationships, both professionally and personally. And in terms of thinking about modern love and relationships, there's no better person on the planet than to talk about this than Brenda.
And the theme of grace.
And the theme of grace. Lily has been working very closely with Brenda. They're like sisters from some weird...
From another life.
From another life, and off they go.
Yeah.
Perfect. So welcome, Brenda. Really great to have you with us.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you. Hello, Lily, Salim. Thank you.
Hi, Brenda.
It's a pleasure. And I'm so thrilled I got to follow Dr. Sabari again. She just lights me up. She's so brilliant and so alive and so real.
Yeah.
Well, you guys look great. It's good to see you. So talking about relationships, I have people contacting me from all over the world with awful stories about, one woman wrote to me saying, how can my husband and I get a friendly divorce? I just can't stand being locked in the house with him during COVID. And I wrote back and said,
was that Lily or was that somebody else?
It wasn't Lily. It wasn't Lily. It was somebody in Europe. But I will say, I'm getting these messages all the time because we aren't used to having all of our happiness, all of our connection, all of our interaction being centered in the home on one another. So when it comes to relationship, only 80% of our happiness in a relationship comes from the direct connection with one another. The rest is all the things we do in our lives. We go out to dinner, we hang out with friends, we create things together. We have, maybe our meditation and our spiritual life together. We travel the world together. It's not just this one-on-one, I'm focused on you all day long, which couples are having to do now. So you all know that there's been a 33% spike in divorce around the world, a tremendous, depends on the country, from 30 to 35% spike in violence against women in their own homes around the world. These are symptoms of severe stress, and also the stress coming from, again, this hyper focus. We're locked in the house together. We have children on top of that. So we have the stress that the children are under, the stress on the relationship, the stress of not knowing when or how this will end, depending on the country you're in. Because some countries that were doing poorly are now doing well. Some that were doing well are now doing poorly. So this is a whole ecosystem that we've just never had to confront. So what do we do? What do we do? Yeah. So very quickly, I want to go into my approach, as Salim said in the introduction, is science-based. And what's important about the science of relationships is that it's all generated from who am I when I show up in my relationship? Am I resourced? Have I done what I need to do to fill up my cup? Do I have a meditation practice? Do I do my yoga? Do I breathe? Do I just sit and develop positive thoughts so that I can come to the relationship a better resourced person? The number one mistake I see couples make, and I have been working with literally tens of thousands of couples throughout my career. I used to go on these tours around the US where we'd have 5,000 couples in one big, huge hotel ballroom. And the number one mistake is believing that it's up to the other person to make you happy. It doesn't work under normal circumstances, and God knows it does not work under these extraordinary circumstances of COVID, when we have all of this outside stress and pressure. So more reason to do number one, I must resource myself. If you haven't got a practice, now is the time to get one. And a practice is anything that allows your brain to reset, because guys, 1 second of science here. You know that stress is actually a brain injury. It means that my brain is depleted of all the neurotransmitters that make me feel balanced, make me feel good, help me connect with you, help me communicate in a way that is thoughtful, that is kind, that is loving. When my brain is hijacked, what happens? Comes out. Good morning. What's good about good morning? So that knee-jerk reaction is a sign your brain is depleted. Now remember, we have 3 brains. There's head brain, heart brain, gut brain. And we need a practice that supports all 3. I think more bang for your buck than any other practice is meditation. Many of us have trouble quieting our minds, so we can't get to quiet meditation. You can do walking meditation, dancing meditation. Just listen to music that helps you to feel calm. Music puts us in a state. The reason we love music is it puts us in a state where the brain starts to refresh itself. We start to rebuild those good neurotransmitters. There are all sorts of ways. Getting massage. You can trade massages with your partner. Anything that you can do to get back in the I'm functioning in a more optimal way to get in that zone. That's important. Number 2, remember that the 2 of you are different people under the best of circumstances. And certainly under COVID, being trapped in the house together, don't expect your partner to suddenly turn into Mother Teresa and serve you and take care of you. Give each other a break every day. One of you has to get out of the house. If you have to mask up, glove up, whatever you have to do, get out, take a walk, take turns. You literally have to get out. Again, it refreshes energy. Now, number 3, whatever is happening with parents will roll over on the children. So if your children are acting out, your children are stressed, the same tools I'm asking you to use for yourself, use them with your children. Children can learn to meditate. Children can take walks and take breaks. Children can learn to refresh themselves by doing any of those practices. Teach your children those tools. It will benefit you as a family, but more importantly, you are setting your children up with tools they can use throughout their lifetime. So when the time comes that they're facing stress because life is going to bring it, they have tools they can use. Now that'll benefit you as a family. Now, number 3, very, very important, fun, F-U-N. Make sure every day you put in, I used to call this crazy time when my kids were little, you have crazy time. You can do whatever you want. You can jump up and down and scream and yell. You can sing, you can dance, you can turn on music. But this is where you just blow it out, because the rest of the time we're holding. We're holding. I have to pay attention. I have to be good. I have to get this to happen. I have to do this. I have to do that. We need time when we just let it go. We're literally, just go a little bit crazy. You go wild. That's very important. It's refreshing. It's fun. Everyone ends up laughing. And laughter, as you all know, is medicine, because when we laugh, we're shaking up this part of the body, and that releases pressure on the gut brain and the heart brain. So now all 3 brains are being optimized. And that is important. If you're going to survive the school year as parents who don't want a divorce or want to harm one another, you need tools. Now, the very last thing is to remember there are questions that you can ask that are skillful questions that will raise your energy and help you to feel better. And there are questions you can ask that will absolutely bring your energy down. Now, the questions that bring you down are, oh God, why is it happening? Oh God, why is this happening to me? Or what am I going to do? Oh God, why am I stuck? Look, I lost money. I lost this. I lost that. Asking those kinds of questions isn't helpful. What is helpful is to say, now that this has occurred, how can I work with my feelings about this? You are entitled to have feelings. You are human. We cannot go, oh, I'm going through a crisis, but that's okay. It's not okay. We feel stressed. We feel hurt. We feel angry. We feel sad. It's okay to have feelings. So ask the questions, what am I really feeling? Oh, yeah, I do feel upset. That way you don't end up projecting it onto your partner. You end up actually addressing your own feelings. Now, the second question that's very important, And this is the money in the bank question. And that question is, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What part of me is being challenged? A part of me that maybe I should have been addressing all along, I'm going to use this time to address. So remember, every experience is a lesson. Every loss is a gain. Only if we're asking the right questions, we're refueling ourselves, and we're meeting this crisis with the idea that we will come out of this, and God help us, we're going to come out of it better people than when we went in, stronger as a couple than when we went in, and we are setting up a model that our children will remember so they can use it as they grow up as a bit of a foundation to build their own relationships. If you have questions for me, hit me back at love@docwade.com. I'm happy to answer your questions, to be here as a resource for you. And thank you so much, Salim and Lily, for having the wisdom to create a channel for all of us to talk about this and be with us. So blessings, everyone.
Well, Brenda, wonderful to see you again. As in different parts of the world come out of this pandemic in different ways, how do you...
Salim, can you turn up your volume a little?
Yeah, let me...
Having a little bit
do that. All right. Is that better?
Thank you. Much better. Thank you.
Okay. I just have to yell more because I've switched devices. We have to do a parenting emergency in the next half hour to an hour. So different parts of the world are under different levels of stress, right? What advice do you give for people that have parents that have family in India or South Africa or Brazil or vice versa, where you're kind of okay and safe, but you've got family members that are under deep stress, and how do you guide them?
You know, that is such a great question. I think because I really know that everything is energy, and that energy is something we can transmit, I absolutely encourage people to use your own form of prayer or energy sending to those loved ones. Let them know that you're there. Let them know that you're holding them in the light and the love and the prayerful energy, whatever is your own practice, but also let them share their feelings with you. You know, just acknowledging the feelings, because we make the mistake of thinking, I must be strong. Being strong does not mean stuffing feelings inside. The things we stuff inside are the things that cause the problems. It leads to more depression, more anxiety, because then we're doing this with all this pressing down. It's better to say, you know what? I am so freaking tired of being locked in this house, and I am frightened because I see what's happening. We're all looking at these numbers around the world. We're seeing a hospital that blew up in India and people dying. We are seeing what's happening. So we can't pretend. It is important to let it out and meet the feelings with, I don't blame you. I understand. You're human. You get to have feelings. Because once they're out, there's a relief. There's a relief.
And are you seeing over the last few months people being less anxious or more anxious, or people being just the fatigue of it all?
Or does it matter where they're sitting in the world?
Say it again, Lily.
Does it matter where they are sitting in the world also?
You know, I think that there are some countries where we are better resourced, where there's more of a family community. We've lost a lot of that, obviously, in the Western parts of the world, especially in the US. But if you have family close by, if you have that network of friends and community, lean into that and look for ways to support one another. But the other question I want to address, Salim, when you said, you know, are people feeling less anxious? I think for countries where lots and lots of people are getting vaccinated, yes. But one thing I know for certain is we haven't begun to process what this pandemic has really meant. There is anxiety, there is depression, there are so many feelings we haven't even begun to process. And I think if you're still in the middle of the crisis, it's very hard, but this is a trauma. And trauma is something that has to be worked through. We're all traumatized.
So basically break out the psychedelics as fast as we can go. Dr. Brenda Wade, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. So good to see you guys again. Thank you,
Brenda.
Lily.
All right.
Thank you, Salim.
Talk to you.
Hug Milan for me.
We will.
For sure.
Okay.
Bye-bye then.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
All right. So that was Dr. Brenda Wade, and you heard a sense of the wisdom there. We are all carrying a huge amount of trauma from the legacy side, and something we'll have to process that. We've got one more super important speaker to kind of bring forward. And Nicole Dreisky is a global expert on how children struggle and parents struggle with the tension of dealing with screens, right? We are natural tendencies to say, ban the screen, the kids are too much on the screen, etc. And she's taken a different approach, which is, wait a minute, they're addicted to the screen. Let's use that. Let's hack that channel and use it for critical thinking. And she's going to talk through a program she created around this that may guide you and give you some help in how to help you deal with kids that are screened. Rather than banning it, use it in a constructive way. So let's hear from Nicole, and we'll be back in a bit to talk about that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Dreisky, and I'm delighted to speak with you today. I launched the first children's film festival in the Americas, and I worked with 500,000 children over 30 plus years. I was trying to address the conundrum of kids and screens from the content perspective. But almost 20 years ago, two pediatricians from the American Academy of Pediatrics came to one of my festivals. They were fascinated by the way I spoke to children before the screening. And one of them said, "You're changing brain chemistry around screen time." Well, that changed everything for me. So I left my big film festivals and I started an organization to help schools and parents implement what I had learned over 30 years of watching screens with children, and more importantly, listening to them talk. In all those years, I learned something that we should all do for and with our kids. Focus on what to do before the screen goes on. We didn't send our children to preschool or the playground without some positive guidelines. When it comes to digital devices, to computers and tablets and smartphones, same rules, the same values and courtesy and kindness and caring that we use in our families apply to the way we use our digital devices. So I created Screen Smart, a program that took everything I had learned and brought it to parents and schools. And after 8 years of field testing, I wrote a book so parents could do these techniques at home. In Screen Smart, we prime children's minds before they start using electronic screens. And this is crucial for e-learning outcomes. By doing this, we help children to be mindful instead of mindless while using technology. We call it turning on the mind before turning on the screen. There are actually two parts to the Screen Smart approach: the intellectual academic part and the kinesthetic physical part. You see, children need to use their physical bodies while they're learning. And here's why. There is a lot of research showing that physical activity and exercise support brain function. Exercise is brain food. You move more, you learn better. So I created a series of fast, fun, brain-body exercises and micro movements that kids and parents and teachers can do anywhere. Now, first, we use priming to turbocharge the mind before the e-learning starts. We tell children we're going to use our energy and our concentration to keep our minds awake. Then we'll move to high energy hand play that raises the energy level and unifies focus. There's also an exercise called palette shell that's like yoga for the fingers. We might touch on micro movements, which are isolation exercises, and then articulation activities, inner mouth calisthenics that promote strong consonants. This kinesthetic, physical part of the program boosts self-regulation, that's self-control, and learning engagement in 100% of children after only 30 to 60 seconds. And as a parent, you then go right back to any lesson the child is working on. These are simple, timely strategies that can turn real or remote classrooms into dynamic learning environments. The second part of the program is intellectual. It builds on that elevated energy and focus to boost academic and social emotional learning in an inquiry-based approach. So what you can do at home is teach literacy, emotional intelligence, and higher order thinking through co-viewing of short story-based videos using a technique that we call pause and question, P&Q. When we pause a video, we'll ask questions like, how do you think that character is feeling right now? What do you see on the screen that gives you clues about how that character is feeling? With pause and question, we can drill down into how children watch and help them to be aware of what's happening in their minds while they're using technology. When you put these two engines together, the kinesthetic brain-body techniques and the academic social emotional learning, you get true accelerated learning. You see, Screen Smart just builds on the fact that children love media. They love screens. And if we give them a chance, they love thinking and talking about the ideas that they have while they're using their digital devices. And here's why that's so exciting. Because when children talk about any screen-based content and make critical thinking connections, they're really learning to process that connection and build their own media filters. They will voluntarily watch less and pick better content and games. Those are healthy tech habits that can accelerate learning. Thanks so much for listening.
Perfect. So that was Nicole Dreisky. Salim, I know that you have a quick emergency, so we have gone on the road.
Well, it's a parenting emergency, so we're doing this live while we navigate this, and this is exactly an example of the dancing and juggling of on hot coals that most parents have to deal with. I think the next step is, I think we've heard from amazing speakers now, right? And I gather you've got some sessions that we're moving to. Is that essentially where we go to next?
Absolutely. So next up, we head to sessions about raising children in the 21st century. So we have 4 amazing community members from the Open EXO community who have stepped up to moderate those sessions. And so we've split them into ages. And so if you have kids, 0 to 6, 7 to 11, I think it's 12 to 14 and 15 to 18, you can join the specific sessions where you can participate, discuss with folks from the Open EXO community, as well as other parents that are on the event, to really get a sense of what it is that we can do as parents. And I say we, I'm actually not a parent, what you can do as parents. So Salim, perhaps 1 or 2 words as you go. I think perhaps we may not see you again, given the situation. So perhaps some words people to share as they go to the session, as well as overall in terms of the event today.
Well, first of all, thank you to Old Mutual for sponsoring this. I think this is a critically important conversation. Maybe the most important conversation we could be having in the world today is how do we bring up our kids to deal with what's coming. We've got massive issues globally, climate change and income inequality, the politics of chaos that's happening around the world, and we have to deal with them, and we have to raise them to deal with this thing. We heard today from some of these folks that are literally the global experts in parenting, loving relationships. Nicole talked about how do you teach your kids. You know, it turns out if you sit with your child for 15 minutes twice a week and ask them those higher order questions like, why do you think the characters are doing what they're doing? That triggers higher order thinking in their brains. And when they're themselves alone, they will have higher order thinking happening in the brain. So she's come up with something incredibly magical that's now working with thousands of kids, and we can propagate that around the world. It's pretty clear that the existing generation can handle the global challenges that we're dealing with. We're going to have to hand it over to our kids. And the best thing I think we can do is get out of the way as fast as possible. So I'll turn it over back to you in the sessions. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to our guests especially. And I think this will be really an amazing thing. So if you have kids of certain age groups, go check out the sessions and we'll see how it goes.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Salim, and all the best your side. So folks, please do now take a look to the left of your screen. You have the sessions tab right over there, and do join us in one of the 4 sessions that are happening now. And then that will go all the way until 8:25 South Africa time. And we can then come back just to say goodbye here on the stage, and we will then see you then. So enjoy the sessions.